So today's lesson is about adding and subtracting fractions, and this moves on from the last lesson that I did on adding and subtracting fractions, but this time we are introducing mixed numbers into the situation as well. So what I've got for you for this is I've actually got two methods. So I'm going to do the same question here twice, and then I've got a couple more to show you as well. And what I want to do here is demonstrate for you the two different ways that you can approach this. It's not like multiplication and division. So with multiplication and division, there's only one way of doing it, but with adding and subtracting, it can be a bit more flexible, and it depends on what you feel like doing at the time and what suits the question best. So in the first method, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to separate out the whole numbers and the fractions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 plus 4 is 7. So the whole number's there, and I'm going to park that for a moment. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with the fractions. We're adding here, so that's why I've added this. So now it's a half plus a third. So I'm essentially going to do those two parts separately. But what I'm going to do all the time is remember that I've already done 3 plus 4 is 7. So at the beginning I'm just going to write 7 plus, and then I've got my half and my third. Now a half and a third, you should remember from the last video I did on adding and subtracting fractions, you have to keep the denominators the same. So we have to use our knowledge of equivalent fractions to make sure that the denominators are the same. So we have our 7 whole ones. Actually, I'll go on to a new line here. We have our 7 whole ones plus, now we need to convert the 1/2 and 1/3 so they've got the same denominator. We look for the lowest common denominator, and in this case that is going to be 6. So 6 is the smallest number, remember, that both 2 and 3 go into. So something over 6 plus something over 6. So what do I do to 2 to give me 6? Well, I multiply by 3, so I must do the same with the numerator. So 1 times 3 is 3. What do I do to 3 to give me 6? Well, I times by 2, so I must do the same with the numerator, and 1 times 2 is 2. So then we've got 7 whole ones plus 3 6 plus 2 6. And 3 6 and 2 6 is 5 6. And I can drop my plus now because I've altogether got 7 and 5 6. Okay, so we don't need to write plus because we've simplified it, we've got it down to our final answer. So that's the first technique. So just to summarise, you deal with your whole numbers, do that part separately, then you do your fractions, and then you just combine the two parts at the end. Now for the second method then, what I'm going to do is, some people find this just easier just to save confusion, because this is actually what you must do for multiplying and dividing, but you don't have to for adding and subtracting, and that is you convert both of these into top-heavy fractions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert 3 1/2 into a top-heavy fraction. So remember, the whole ones, if I'm looking at halves, every one whole one has got 2 halves in it. I've got 3 whole ones, so that's 6 halves, plus the 1 up here, so that's 7 altogether. So that gives me 7 over 2 plus, now 4 and 1/3, so 4 whole ones, every whole one has got 3 thirds. So if I've got 4 whole ones, 4 times 3 is 12, plus the 1 on the top gives me 13. So I've got 13 over 3, okay? Now I do the same as I did last time. I've got to put them over the same common denominator. Now I've already done that up here, haven't I? So I know it's 6. And just like I did before, but this time multiplication is a little more tricky, but still manageable. 7 over 2, I need to convert to something over 6. What do I do to the 2 to give me 6? I times by 3. I must do the same with the 7. 7 times 3 is 21. On the bottom here I've got a 3. What do I do to that to give me 6? I times by 2. So I have to do the same with the 13. 13 times by 2 is 26. 21 plus 26 is 47. So I've got 47 over 6. The last thing then that I need to do is need to convert that back into a mixed number. So how many times does 6 go into 47 exactly? The answer is it goes in 7 times. 7 6s are 42. How many have I got left over? I've got 5 left over. So the answer is 7 and 5 6. So we've got the same answer. Now I would say that method 1 is definitely shorter, but method 2 somehow it seems to make more sense for people. So it really does depend on what you feel comfortable doing, and if you just want to remember to turn them into top heavy fractions, then by all means do that. So I've got a couple more examples for you on the inside. Okay, so second one, we've got a subtraction. Now you've got to decide which method to use. Now it might be you want to stick with one method all the time, and that's absolutely fine. Or you might decide that you want to chop and change, okay, and that's perfectly fine and totally up to you. We've got Digby joining us today. So 7 1/3 minus 4 3/4. The first thing you should notice here is that 1/3 is smaller than 3/4. And so if you decide to use the first method, you're going to get into a bit of difficulty, because when you do a third, take away, remember, 3/4, you're going to end up with a negative fraction, so it gets a bit more messy. So I would personally recommend, particularly with subtraction, if you're not sure if that's going to happen, you can convert it into a top heavy fraction and then do your sum. So that's what we're going to do with this one. So we're going to use method 2, okay? So top heavy fraction, we need to change that into a certain number of thirds. So remember, 7 times 3 is 21, plus the 1 on top, 22. Take away 4 times 4 is 16. 16 plus the 3 is 19. Okay, so that's what we get. Now we've got to make sure then that we convert our denominators to be exactly the same, and in this case the lowest common denominator of 3 and 4 is 12, so I need to change them into 12ths. What do I do to 3 to make it 12? I times by 4, must do the same to the top, so that gives me 88. What do I do to 4 to make it into 12? I times by 3, do the same to the 19, and that gives me 57. Then all I have to do now is 88 over 12, take away 57 over 12, and if I do that I get 31 over 12, okay? And then all you've got to do is to convert that back into a mixed number. So how many times does 12 go into 31? It goes in twice, and 2 lots of 12 is 24. I need to get to 31. What's left over? There are 7 left over. So the answer is 2 7/12. Okay? Right, so number 3, I think with this one then, this one seems nice and straightforward. We have got 9 here. 9 whole ones, don't forget, you're going to have to do 9 times 3 if you turn it into an improper fraction. So that's going to give you 27, plus the extra 2 is 29, so that's going to give you quite large numbers on the top. And then don't forget, you've got to get your lowest common denominator. Plus it's addition, so we're not going to have the difficulty of subtracting and ending up with a negative fraction. So I think this one is safe to add our whole numbers. So 1 plus 9 is 10, and then add our fractions separately. So 7/8 plus 2/3. Okay. So our lowest common denominator for these is going to be 24. What do I times 8 by to give me 24? Times by 3. So I've got to do the same with the 7. So 3 times 7 is 21. And then what do I times 3 by to give me 24? That's 8. And so 2 times 8 is 16, so I have to do the same to the top. And that then gives me 10. And 21 plus 16 is 37. So I've got 10 and 37 over 24. Now you will notice that actually that is an improper fraction. So the 37 over 24 means that actually I'm going to get another whole one out. Now you've got to work out how many whole ones. 24 goes into 37 once, so there's going to be one more whole one. So we've got 1 added to our 10, so it gives us 11. And then how many are left over? It's just 13. Okay, 1 lot 24 is 24. The difference between 24 and 37 is 13. And so therefore we have 11 and 13 over 24. Okay, last question then. Again, it is a subtraction. You've got to make a decision. You can do it either way. I actually think with this one we might as well, these numbers are quite small, we might as well turn them into improper fractions. So 2 times 7 is 14 plus the 5 gives me 19. 1 times 5 is 5 plus the 1, 6 over 5. Okay. Lowest common denominator here is 35. Now I'm actually going to go over to this side so that you can see nice and easily. So we've got our fraction over 35, and again 7 times 5 gives me 35, so I've got to do the same to the 19, and that gives me 95, and then 5 times 7 gives me 35, so I've got to do the same to the 6, and that is 42. Now we have to just do 95 take away 42, which is 53. Okay, and then all we've got to do is cancel that down. So we need to work out how many whole ones go into that. So 35 goes into 53 once, okay, and then all we've got to do is we've just got to do 1 times 35 is 35, and so therefore we've just got to find the difference between 53 and 35. And a little technique you can do if you're ever stuck and you don't have your calculator because it's a non-calculator paper, you can always do a sum. So we've got 53, we've got 35, and we're going to subtract them. Okay, 3 take away 5 you can't do, borrow 1 from here, put that over. 13 take away 5, okay, is 8, and then we've got 4 take away 3, which is 1, and so the answer is 18. So it's 1 and 18 over 35. Okay, so that is how we add and subtract fractions when we've got mixed numbers. Just be careful to decide to choose the correct method for you, and if you prefer one, then I suggest you stick with that. Okay.